Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and welcome to the next episode, the 7th episode of my Rules Roundup series, where I go over rules questions that were asked in the unofficial global Discord, and you can either test yourself on this knowledge or become a better player by learning about stuff that you didn't know already. This week is going to be a little bit shorter than usual for a couple reasons. One is that the area that I get these questions from, which is kind of the main section of the rulings question channel in the Discord, didn't have a whole lot of questions in the last little bit here. The other reason being that I'm actually about to go out of town for a few days, and so I'm trying to get this done before I head out of town. So it kind of works out to have a little bit less questions than usual. So this will be a little bit shorter. So if you enjoy having things a little bit shorter here, then good for you. And if you're disappointed that it's not longer, then I'll be back next week probably. So anyway, let's go over the questions that we do have here and see what we got. All right, first question here is, if I cast Shiva with the extra cost while it is removed by Lenne, do I get it back to hand? This Lenne is from the newest set. I haven't seen it show up in any materia cups yet, at least not in top cut lists, but it's a pretty cool card. I know that it got a lot of attention when it first got spoiled. And all we need to know about Lenne here is that she's got a couple of different abilities, an auto ability and an action ability, both of which can remove a card from a zone, and then you can cast it later, right? So she's got this ability that removes something, puts it in the remove from play zone, and then can cast it later. That's all you need to know about her abilities for the purpose of this question. Then you have the Shiva here, which this one has this first part of it that says, if you cast Shiva, you may remove 4 ice cards in your break zone, remove them from the game as an extra cost, and then in her main effect here, it says if you paid the extra cost, return Shiva to its owner's hand after you've done the effect, the rest of the effect there. So the question here is that if you use Lenne and you've got this removed from play Shiva and you cast it, can you still pay the extra cost and then have Shiva return to your hand? And the thing you want to understand here to get the answer to this is that anytime a summon is cast from any zone, it goes onto the stack. And it doesn't just go onto the stack kind of conceptually the way that abilities do, but summon cards, they are the only cards in the game that physically go on the stack, because the stack is a zone in the game. It's a single zone. You don't have like the other zones that have 2 versions of it where it's one for one player and one for the other. There's actually only one single stack, but it is a zone that a card moves to if it's a summon. So even though you're casting it from the remove from play zone with her effect, with Lenne's effect here, Shiva is going to physically go on the stack, and then once it's there, it's going to resolve the way that it normally would. Just because Lenne's effect doesn't have any specifications about what happens after you cast it. Sometimes there's these cards that will cast something from a summon, usually from somewhere else, and then after it's been cast, it goes, okay, remove it from the game instead. Her effects don't say that, and so because of that, we resolve Shiva normally the way we would if she was cast in any other way. So she's on the stack, and you pay the extra cost, so after her effect resolves, she returns to your hand. So yeah, the answer there is that if you cast her removed from Lenne, then you do get her back to hand. It's pretty cool. All right, next question is, can Scorpion Sentinel dull the attacking forward, thus negating the attack, or does it have to be a different forward from the one attacking? This is another new card from Opus 25. I like the flavor on this that they have with the effect, but to go over it here, the effect on Scorpion Sentinel is it says, when a forward opponent controls attacks, choose one forward opponent controls. Dull it, and then until the end of the turn, Sentinel becomes a 7,000 power forward, and it says it'll only trigger once per turn. The rest of that's not really important. We're looking at the first part of this, which says, when a forward opponent controls attacks, choose one forward opponent controls, dull it. That's what's relevant here. So there's 2 questions here that the person is asking. First one is, can Scorpion Sentinel dull the attacking forward, thus negating the attack? The answer here is no, and the reason why is because the auto ability on Scorpion Sentinel, the trigger here, the trigger event, is, it says when a forward opponent controls attacks, which means your opponent has to attack in order for this to trigger in the first place. So the way this will work out is your opponent declares an attack, Scorpion Sentinel triggers, it's going to get put on the stack, assuming there's nothing else that happens or gets added to the stack, it resolves, and when it resolves, now at that point you're choosing a forward and you're doubling it. So we are like several points past when that forward is already declared an attack and is attacking. Once a forward declares an attack, it doesn't matter what happens to them at that point, as long as they are A, still a forward, and B, still on the field, then they're still attacking. It doesn't matter if they become dull, it doesn't matter if they become frozen, it doesn't matter if they lose their abilities. If they're still a forward and they're still on the field and they declared an attack, they are still attacking until they are blocked or one of those things changes that I just mentioned. So you can dull the forward, but it's not gonna negate the attack. Now the other half of this question says, or does it have to be a different forward from the one attacking? And here we just look at what the wording is of the auto ability. It says choose one forward opponent controls. That's your only requirement there. If it's a forward your opponent controls, you can choose it. It doesn't have to be the one that attacked. It can be a completely unrelated forward. Now it can also be the forward that attacked, which a lot of times it's not useful to dull the forward that attacked because it generally it will have dulled to do so. It's the normal thing that happens when you declare an attack. But if it had brave, you can use this effect to still dull it. Or if it's something like legendary Yuffie and it reactivated itself after it attacked. Actually, I guess that wouldn't work here because that would resolve after Scorpion Sentinel. But let's say something, had attacked and then they cast a summon. Actually, I can't really think of a good use case for this if they reactivated it. But let's just say if it was a brave forward, that's the easy one there. If it's a brave forward, then yeah, you can still dull it. But you can target whatever you want really of the opponent's forwards. Okay, next question here is about Zenos and Edward. It says, I play Zenos. My opponent does Amaterasu Zenos. I have Edward open to use his ability. If I use Edward on the stack of that Amaterasu, does Zenos discard still trigger? This Zenos, not an Opus 25 card, but still somewhat recent, and I think people are maybe not as familiar with him, so let's go over what he does quickly here. He's got two auto abilities. I'm going to point out the second one first, because that's the one that's really key here. The second auto ability says, when a card in your opponent's break zone leaves the break zone, your opponent discards one card. This effect will trigger only once per turn. So for any reason, if there's a card in your opponent's break zone and it changes zones, it goes somewhere else, then it's going to trigger Zenos, and that ability, when it resolves, will make your opponent discard a card. Now, the first half of Zenos says that when he enters the field, you choose up to two forwards in your opponent's break zone and then remove them from the game. So this is one of these cute situations where you have a character with two auto abilities that interact with each other, right? They feed off of each other, so you kind of get that initial, like, oh, cool, I got to trigger the thing that this does right away. Because the normal use case for Zenos is that you cast him, you play him he gets, enters the field. You choose two forwards in the opponent's break zone, they get removed, and then once they get removed, now they've triggered that second auto ability of his. It goes on a stack, forces them to discard. Now, separate from that, we have Edward. He's much more simple. Just a backup, says dull him, choose one card in your opponent's break zone, remove it from the game. Okay, take whatever card in your opponent's break zone, poof, move it. So the question here is that Zenos, in this situation, Zenos was cast, just entered the field. That trigger, the auto ability, went on the stack to choose two forwards and remove from the game. Opponent casts Amaterasu, right? So we have Zenos' entry ability on the stack, then we have Amaterasu on top. If nothing else happened, the Amaterasu would cancel the Zenos auto ability, deal him 8,000 damage, he would break, and the ice player is sad, right? So what they want to do here is that with the Amaterasu still on the stack, they're going to go ahead and respond by using Edward's ability to now choose a card in the opponent's break zone and remove it from the game. So they want to know if they do that here with this stack the way it is that going to trigger Zenos' auto ability to make the opponent have to discard? And there's a couple reasons I can see why they're asking this question, where it might not be clear. The first one is that there's the question of like, does the timing work out where Zenos is still on the field? Which, yes, you're responding to the Amaterasu. And the Amaterasu doesn't do anything until it resolves, so Zenos is still on the field. And the Edward will resolve before the Amaterasu has gotten rid of Zenos. The other question here could be that Zenos' second ability says this effect will trigger only once per turn. So they might be thinking, oh, you know what? Like, I already was going to remove something, and that was going to trigger this. So is it going to trigger now later because this is the second time removing something from the break zone? And here the answer is that because his auto ability, the trigger event, is a card in the opponent's break zone leaving the field, it's not going to trigger until that happens, which it hasn't happened at the point that that's still on the stack. It's the whole point kind of the Amaterasu is to make it not happen. So if that was your worry, then no, Edward's going to be the first time that turn that something is removed from their break zone and triggering Zenos. So yeah, you can absolutely respond with Edward and uses his ability while the Amaterasu is on the stack, and then after his ability resolves, then it's going to trigger Zenos. That's going to go on the stack above the Amaterasu, and then that's going to resolve, and then Amaterasu, and then Zenos is toast. And then the original auto ability to remove 2 forwards gets canceled, of course, by the Amaterasu. All right, next question here is, if I prime Clive into Ifrit and Magic Pot the Ifrit, what forward do I summon from the Magic Pot? I love Magic Pot. It's such a unique effect. This is an Opus 4 monster that has an action ability that part of the cost is that you put Magic Pot and then a forward that you control into the break zone. And then what you get to do is you get to search for a forward that has the same name as the forward that you put into the break zone as the cost and play it onto the field, right? So you get to swap out whatever forward on the field for one in your deck, which can be a completely different serial number, a different version of the same card name, right? So the question here is that you're doing that with a primed Clive into Ifrit. So what do you get to summon, or what do you get to pull out of your break zone with a search? And the short answer to this here is you get to choose either one, because the primed Ifrit has both card names. It's both Ifrit 16 and it is Clive. I'm not going to dive into that any further, but that's the short version of it. And the reason I'm not going to dive into it any further is because if you've been watching any of these other videos, anytime somebody mentions priming, you know that I have to promote here. I have to self-promote that you should go watch my video about priming. So Judge Jared Explains Priming, where I go over everything about priming. And I bring that up anytime somebody has a priming question, but I'm going to bring it up even more so here because I cover this exact scenario in that video. I talk specifically about Magic Pot and how it works with a primed card, that has the 2 card names and everything. And as you can see, yeah, I talked about it right there. Look at that. This is from the video, me talking about Magic Pot. We've got a little bit of judgeception going on here. So, yeah, go watch the video and you'll see, a kind of probably a more in-depth answer about the Magic Pot there, and then other weird situations that come up, like what happens if you were to use Opus 6 Renoa on a primed card and things like that. So anyway, yeah, go watch that video. Either pause this and watch that and come back, or finish watching this and then go watch that. Anyway, next question. I have a question about Byblos's dull freeze mechanic. Let's assume that my opponent only has 1 forward on the field with which he can block. Would the sequence of actions work the way I envision it? Step 1, Byblos becomes a forward. Step 2, I declare an attack with Byblos. Step 3, his effect causes the opponent to discard a card. 4, the discarded card causes the opponent's forward to become dull frozen. And then 5, the opponent no longer has a chance to block and my attack goes through. Now Byblos, thanks to the length of this question, it's very small here. So if you're not familiar with him or you haven't seen him in a little while, probably don't remember what he does. So to answer this question, let's blow him up really quickly here. Okay, Big Byblos. So he's got 2 abilities here. And the second one here is an action ability. It says until the end of the turn, Byblos also becomes a forward with 7,000 power. And when Byblos attacks, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. And then he's got an auto ability that says when your opponent discards 1 or more cards from their hand due to your summons or abilities, choose 1 forward opponent controls, dull it, and freeze it. So this is cute because it's like the Zenos earlier, right? We've got 2 abilities that interact with each other. Once Byblos can turn into a forward, which is at damage 3, once it can turn into a forward, then when it attacks, it causes your opponent to discard. And it already has this auto ability on it that says when your opponent discards, you get to choose a forward of theirs and dull it and freeze it, right? So now that we've got the kind of reminder on those, let's go ahead and come back to the questions and see how all this works out. So the sequence of events. Number 1, Byblos becomes a forward. Okay, now I'm going to point out here, just to be clear on this, that it's an action ability that you have to use and then has to resolve before Byblos becomes a forward. which means that if you want to declare an attack with Byblos, you need to use this action ability and have it resolve before the attack declaration step. If you wait until the attack declaration step, it's now too late to do that in the like the same attack window there. You have to either attack with something else and then come back to attack the declaration, or if you don't have something else to attack with, now you've gone too far, and now you're not going to be able to declare one with Byblos that turn. So make sure that you activate Byblos before we get to the attack declaration step. Okay, with that out of the way. Step 2, I declare the attack with Byblos. Okay. So that's in the attack declaration step, obviously. Step 3, his effect causes the opponent to discard a card. Okay, so what happened is that in step 2, we declared the attack with Byblos, and then that attack triggered the auto ability that said when Byblos attacks, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. All right, so they declared the attack, that triggered, went on the stack, assuming that nothing else got added or interrupted, then that resolves, causes the opponent to discard a card. Yep, that's step 3 there. Then the discarded card causes the opponent's forward to become dull frozen. That's step 4 here. And so yeah, to go over that, we just had the discard from attacking. That then triggered Byblos's auto ability, the other one, which says choose a forward your opponent controls, dull and freeze it. So yeah, that lines up with what they said here with step 4. And this is all happening still in the attack declaration step, by the way, because we're not moving to block declaration until after both players consecutively pass on an empty stack without taking any actions. Okay, so yeah, discarded card causes the opponent's forward to become dull frozen. And in this scenario at the beginning of it, they mentioned their opponent only had 1 forward, so now we've dull frozen their only forward. And then step 5 here, the opponent no longer has a chance to block, and my attack goes through. So yeah, that matches up too, because if we just dull froze their only forward. And so after that happened, we moved to the block declaration step. And at this point, they don't have a forward that is valid for declaring as a blocker because they don't have an active forward at all. So yeah, at that point, unless they removed Byblos somehow before the damage resolution step, then yes, the attack goes through. So the good news here is the person asking this question, they nailed it. They got it all perfect, right? One more time, just to go over it. Activate Byblos, becomes a forward. Declare an attack with Byblos, triggers the auto ability. That auto ability resolves, causes the opponent to discard a card. That triggers the other auto ability. Makes them, or you pick something to dull freeze a forward. That auto ability chooses their only forward they have to become dull frozen. And then at that point, the opponent no longer has a chance to block. Again, assuming they didn't have an effect to like reactivate that forward or something before block declaration. So yeah, that's a perfectly valid and good read on how Byblos interacts and how to get that kind of layering the way you want it. All right, last question for today. It says, hi, if I had Dragoon on the field with 2 other cards named Dragoon, and then Porom's action ability with 3 EXP counters is used on Dragoon, does the gain from the ongoing effect of Dragoon still happen after the power being set to 1,000? Or does the gain become canceled out by the effect of its power becoming 1,000 until the end of the turn? All right, 2 different questions here on this, and I'll come back to them. Let's go over both cards. Dragoon has a field ability, says for each other job Dragoon, card named Dragoon, other than itself that you control, it gains plus 2,000 power. So it's a field ability, gives you plus 2,000 for each other Dragoon. So they mentioned in this scenario they had 2 other card named Dragoons. So uninterrupted, this Dragoon is at 9k power, like assuming there's nothing else affecting its power, right? So 2 more Dragoons is at 9k power. Then we have Porom here, and Porom has the action ability where she can choose a forward and then make it lose its abilities until the end of the turn. But if she has 3 or more EXP counters on her, then in addition to making the forward lose its abilities, it also makes its power become 1,000. So there's a couple things we want to understand here about how this all works with losing abilities and what Dragoon's ability does and what ongoing effects are and setting power. It's kind of a grab bag of concepts we want to understand here. The first I guess I'll go over is that Porom, as far as the setting to 1,000, when there's an effect that says that you set a forward's power to something, to some number, that is affecting the base power, or the way I like to think of it is the printed power on the card, right? So if it says its power becomes XYZ, we're talking about just the number on the bottom right corner. It becomes that, right? Its printed power is now being like overwritten with something else. So in the case of Dragoon, it was 5,000 power. It's now becoming 1,000. So now we're pretending like Dragoon has a printed, in the bottom right 1,000 instead of 5,000. So that's the first thing. Because of that, we're only talking about the printed power, which means we're not talking about its power becoming this number after you've accounted for all the other effects that might be going on. We're just talking about that. So if there was other effects that were either adding to or subtracting from Dragoon's power, after you set it to 1,000, now you're still applying those other things to it, right? So that's the first thing to understand. Second thing to understand here is how ongoing effects work. So we have kind of two different ways that ongoing effects are generated. One is either from a field ability, where a field ability is always on a character, and the second is when you have effects that have resolved on the stack. They can create ongoing abilities. So kind of more often than not, we see ongoing abilities that are a result of an effect that has gone on the stack and resolved, and then after it resolves, the source of the ongoing effect is that other one, that effect that resolved. So there's no way to interact with it after it resolves, right? If you had like a summon that said all of your forwards gain plus 1,000 power until the end of the turn, after it resolves, that ongoing effect is out there. It says they all gain 1,000 power till the end of the turn, but there's no way to get at the source of it at that point. The source is already resolved. It's gone. There's no way to kind of cut it off at the knees and make it go away. With field abilities, it's different because the source of the ongoing effect, it's doing the same thing. It's creating this ongoing effect that says, oh yeah, you get this. In the case of Dragoon, it's getting plus 2,000 power for every other Dragoon that you have. But the source of that is a field ability, and you can interact with field abilities, which means it is possible to cut it off at the source. And that's what's happening with Porom here, is that Porom is going to remove the ability from Dragoon, which means that even though it was creating an ongoing effect, the moment that ability goes away, the ongoing effect is also gone, right? Because now its source has been interrupted. It's kind of like if we had a spotlight that was shining up into the sky, and now the power to the spotlight has gotten cut off. Well, now we don't have a spotlight going into the sky because we cut off the source of that power there. Okay. So to answer the question specifically here, the way that they asked it, the first one was, does the gain from the ongoing effect of Dragoon still happen after the power being set to 1,000? The answer is no. The gain doesn't happen because it lost its abilities. It lost the source of that ongoing effect. Then the other part of it was, does the gain become canceled out by the effect of its power becoming 1,000 to the end of the turn? The gain doesn't become canceled by becoming 1,000. So again, the setting Dragoon's power to 1,000 in and of itself doesn't make it lose the ongoing effect. If we'd had a separate effect that just made Dragoon's power become 1,000 but didn't remove its abilities, then in this scenario it would be 5,000 power again, because its printed power would change to 1,000, and then there would still be the field ability and two other Dragoons who would give it plus 4,000, and you would just bring it up to 5,000. I guess it was at 9,000 before, right? But yeah, so it would become 5,000 in that scenario. So the things we want to walk away from this understanding is we want to understand that changing printed power, setting power, so when it says its power becomes this, you're only talking about changing the printed power, and you're still going to apply other effects. And the other part of this is that ongoing effects that are created by field abilities can be shut off if the character that has that ability loses that ability. Okay, so yeah, in this scenario, you would end up with Dragoon being 1,000 power because Porom's effect set it to 1,000 power, and because it lost the field ability that it had, so there's no more ongoing effect there. All right, that's the last question for today. So yeah, a little bit shorter than usual, and I'll be back at this, like I said, probably next week. I've so far been pretty consistent on doing this every week here, but I hope that you all enjoy your weekend. Hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend this last weekend here, And as always, if you want to send me any questions or you have any ideas for like, hey, I'd love to see you cover XYZ, you can reach out to me and ask me there. Oh yeah, like and subscribe, right? I gotta do the YouTube video thing here, right? Like and subscribe, because it makes me feel good. I like getting likes. I like getting subscribers. So, if you enjoy what you're seeing, then go ahead and throw a like and subscribe. I appreciate it. For those of you that already did, you're awesome. Thank you so much. I think that'll wrap it up for today. So, as always, thank you for watching. I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.